What do you do when you cannot get rid of someone from your life? Law enforcement doesn't seem to be doing a damn thing. The courts only offer you a worthless piece of paper, so you try to move on. But the psycho keeps coming back. Until one day, the entire situation takes a deadly turn. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the true crime author of close to 50 books. I've dedicated the past 25 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. There are some people in life, few as they seem to be these days, who have this after effect on those they come in contact with. Be it a stranger at the bank or post office, a homeless person on the street, a family member, a friend, or an entire community. They give back in ways many will never know, and that's okay with them. It's not about what they get out of it. It's about doing their part to change lives. At 26 years old in 2006, Alexandra Ducsay is one of those people. An aspiring actress, Xandra, as she liked to be called, was ecstatic to have landed a small role on the hit television series Law and Order. She'd graduated magna cum laude from Albertus Magnus College, had been working for People's Bank for 10 years already. She is a licensed real estate agent, a model, and as I said, an actress and philanthropist and volunteer. But also her absolute love and passion, a professional dancer. Beyond being beautiful on the inside, Xandra has straight brown hair, exquisite brown eyes, and the clearest porcelain skin you'd ever imagine. It's easy to tell by looking at her photographs what producers saw in Xandra. She just had that it factor Hollywood and New York seemed to look for. When I mention how some people touch the lives of others, in Xandra's case, there was hardly a Christmas that went by without Xandra organizing a drive to collect gifts for kids. She would even take it a step further and bring presents to the kids around the Bridgeport, Connecticut area in order to make sure as many children as possible did not go without a visit from Santa. So dedicated to this particular service, Xandra gets behind the wheel of the truck herself and drives to each home, making sure to see the joy on each of the kids' faces. Xandra lives in Milford, Connecticut, a shoreline town in between New Haven and Bridgeport, Interstate 95 cutting directly through. As the crow flies, 3 Boothbay Street, where Xandra resides with her mother, is just a few blocks from Walnut Beach, Long Island Sound. It's a residential area. Most homes are refurbished from their glory days of the 1920s and 30s. 1- and 2-story houses with those quintessential New England dormers and screened-in porches, a small yard, fireplace, and crumbling, tarred driveways. Anyone in this region of New England knows the type of house I'm referring to. They are dotted all over the Connecticut shoreline. Xandra had been looking forward to so many things that early spring of 2006, dancing, acting, modeling, more community service work, church activities, and a host of other things she is involved in. It seems that Xandra had not a free minute to spare, and she liked her life structured this way. If there was one thorn in Xandra's side, it had to be a dude named Matthew Pugh, a 42-year-old who struck the exact opposite image to Xandra's pure form of giving back and expressing love. Pugh and Xandra met when she was 16 and he 32, so there is quite an age difference. Xandra was a child at the time she met Pugh. The other major difference is that Matthew Pugh is a street guy who grew up ripping and running, came across demanding and controlling, and had displayed signs of losing it whenever his ego felt the least bit threatened. He likes people to think he's a tough guy. You know, someone who just plows through life thinking the world owes them something. And he plays the part of hustler as well, the kind of guy you don't want to cross in any way. But for whatever reason, Xandra had fallen in love with the man and, perhaps being an empath and not wanting to ever give up on people, had stuck it out until 2004 when Pugh had finally become too much and she ended the relationship. From the time Pugh was 16, he had been in big trouble, selling drugs, assault, and also weapons charges. So he is not someone who has shown any sort of indication he wants to change in any way. Pugh would get busted, serve time in prison, but not let up with his need to bother and control Xandra. When she finally ends it with him in 2004, after he catches a new prison bid, Pugh begins sending her letters threatening to share photos of her with her employer if she doesn't do exactly what he wants. Is there a worse human being than this? Trying to manipulate and control a woman by intimidation from behind prison bars. Pugh is a textbook stalker. He'd want to know what Xandra was doing all the time. Abnormal, run-of-the-mill, coercive control and abuse. That's what he does. And please resist the question that might be running through your mind, as it does my own when these cases come around. Why would anyone stay with this guy all that time if he was so abusive and controlling? It is a normal human response to such a situation when we hear it. I am with you. But I have written enough books about women in these same situations to tell you that it is not as easy as walking out the door and telling the dude to piss off. Some of these guys are like a cancerous mole you cut off, think it's finally gone, and then one day you look down and there it is again. No matter what you do, the thing keeps coming back. A restraining order, we all know, is meaningless. It's a piece of paper to make the courts and law enforcement feel good. By the time the order can be beneficial to the victim, it's far too late. So what happens in many of these situations is that it becomes easier for the victim to appease the abuser and make him think he is in control. Not to mention the psychological damage the guy has done to the person. Xandra, like all women in her position, never asked for any of this. She is a victim. And lots of victims become so disenfranchised with law enforcement and the courts not doing anything, they toss in the towel and deal with the situation the best way they can, themselves. Coercive control is such a dangerous psychological game played by the abuser. The victim doesn't truly understand she is being controlled. Still, all that being said, by 2004, when Pugh is sent away for a 2-year bid after several drug convictions, Xandra has cut him out of her life for good. She had done it, freed herself from the cancer. Despite his repeated attempts to control her from his prison cell by threats, there was no going back. Not ever. And Pugh, he knew it this time. Which is when, as Pugh began serving time, he begins to hyper-focus on Xandra, kicking his threatening behavior up a few notches, sending even more disturbing letters, some of which include the likes of, "You are going to regret you ever met me. I will make your life a living hell." In another letter, Pugh cranks up the tone and harassment, writing, "Maybe you need your ass ass kicked by some bitch just to get that bitch out of you. You are lucky I am not that kinda N-word because I can really make you look ugly for life. He continues, I can't do this on my own without you. I pray for your ass big time. So if you don't start making time for me and making this bid comfortable for me until I get out, you are gonna regret it. I'm tired of being the nice guy from now on because you can't change who I am. You tried, but because of your broken promises, now I have to get ugly with you and whoever else want it. You see how he blames her? Tries to make it her fault. His failures are her doing. His meaningless life is all because of her. His anger justified by his own insecurities. He sent several more letters in the same vein, all of which display pure, malignant narcissism. The epitome of a sociopath telling us who he is, showing us who he is. A guy like this will not change, period. One of the only things that can stop this type of threatening harassment against his victims is if the abuser directs his obsession toward a different victim, or he dies. Before she broke it off with him, Pugh had racked up a multitude of domestic violence offenses against Xandra. Since breaking it off, Xandra had met a new guy, Jermaine Moore, and she seems to be happy in what is a healthy relationship for the first time in her life. Having been locked up in 2004 and sentenced to 2 years, the way Connecticut courts work, Pugh, of course, does not have to serve his entire sentence. He is let out early. Pugh has that ego-driven, narcissistic, cocky look about him. The raised chin, the sneer of a dude anyone not doing what he says likes to project. The big, wide eyes, the utter contempt for anyone not catering to his wants and needs. You all get the picture. We've all seen this type of guy. He exudes discontent. He wields the opposite of charm. Ugly in every way. Near noon on May 19th, 2006, Xandra and her new boyfriend are talking on the phone. Normal stuff people in a relationship discuss. At one point during the phone call, Xandra says, "My ex is here." Pugh had been threatening Xandra the entire time he's been out of prison. And of course, a guy like this doesn't call or announce he is coming over. He just shows up, demands your full attention, tells you his needs, and expects you to jump. "Hold on," Xandra tells her boyfriend, so she can go and deal with Pugh. She doesn't hang up. Xandra's boyfriend can actually hear the exchange in the background as he waits for Xandra to come back to the phone. "Why are you here?" she asks Pugh. She is angry. "You were supposed to call first." After a period of time, Xandra gets back on the phone with her boyfriend. "I'll call you back," she tells him, and hangs up. He waits for about 20 minutes. Xandra soon calls back, and they resume their conversation. She had gotten rid of Pugh somehow. There's an eerie tension now on the phone call. Something has happened. Xandra and her new boyfriend talk for a few more minutes, but don't mention Pugh again during the call. I need to take our first break. More Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps in one moment. Throughout that afternoon when Jermaine and Xandra spoke, when Xandra's ex, Matthew Pugh, showed up unannounced, after hanging up with Jermaine, nobody hears from Xandra again. Maybe she's busy, working, out shopping, decided she doesn't want to talk to anyone. I think it's a good time here to digress a bit and mention that obsession is an aggressively dangerous fixation for the obsessed, mostly driven by the narcissist's need for a continued supply of stimulation, validation, and control. A self-centered way in which the abuser perceives his needs. If you've never experienced obsession firsthand as a victim, it is hard to understand the intensity of the focus the abuser displays. It is almost as if they have this endless source of energy. And as I say here on Crossing the Line, this behavior often never de-escalates. It always escalates, generally into risky and progressively violent fantasies playing inside the head of the abuser, who will, at some point, ultimately decide to act them out in the real world. Just so you know, the signs of obsession include love bombing, gaslighting, guilt tipping, which is usually guilt to try to influence the victim's behaviors and decisions. We see this in the letters Pugh writes to Xandra. It's her fault he is not doing well in prison. It's her fault he is in the predicament he is in. And it's her fault he is a loser and cannot take care of himself. It's her fault he cannot move on. What this behavior shows is how fragile Pugh's ego and self-esteem are, how emotionally weak he is, the fact that he has zero confidence in himself, and also how deep his insecurities are rooted. He needs the attention to make him feel like a man because, in the grand scope, he is a child inside. At 4:30 p.m., Xandra's mother walks through the door of their 3 Booth Bay Street house in Milford, Connecticut. It's very quiet inside, unusually quiet. Xandra isn't stepping out and greeting her mom, which is strange. And the house just has this empty feeling. Not that nobody is home, but that something is terribly off. I think parents just know. They have this instinct about their children when something is wrong. Maybe it's the same thing twins experience, a kinetic energy. Who knows? Whatever it is, an inherent silent voice speaks to most parents in certain moments. And this is one of those for Xandra's mother. When Xandra's mother doesn't see her daughter after walking to the house and calling out for her on May 19th, she begins looking for her. Xandra's car is parked outside. Where could she be? After searching the entire house upstairs, Xandra's mother opens the basement door and calls out her name. No answer. So she walks down the stairs, which is where, in the basement, she sees Xandra on the floor. And it's clear something horrible has happened. Xandra has what a warrant describes as a significant amount of trauma to her head. It's a gruesome, gruesome scene. Her mother calls 911 immediately. When officers arrive at 4:44 p.m., Xandra's mother is obviously hysterical and crying out that she thinks her daughter is dead. Officers head down into the basement. They know immediately that they are dealing with a homicide scene. Xandra, it appears from early indications, has been beaten to death in a very violent manner. They get her mother out of the house and begin to tape off the scene. It is soon confirmed that Xandra died from craniocerebral trauma, which means her skull was caved in and her brain severely damaged, ultimately causing her death. Xandra also has multiple sharp and blunt force injuries to her upper body, which tells them she was likely also stabbed and beaten with a blunt force object. So these aren't clean wounds you would see from a knife. Her killer, it is clear, displayed an explosion of violence from a deep place of internal rage. Overkill, in other words. Her killer began and could not stop. At the crime scene, investigators from the Milford Police Department find a number of pieces of trace evidence, which leads them to believe Zandra's killer flipped into a rage and didn't care about leaving evidence behind. The murder was all about making her pay. Revenge. And it's clear that her murder took place between 12:30 p.m., when she last spoke to her boyfriend, and 4:30 p.m., when her mother came home. And now they know the last person to have been physically in Zandra's presence was Matthew Pugh. Milford investigators call it a crime of passion in their warrant, a crime scene and medical examiner's report describing the familiar and emotional nexus existing between the victim and her killer, a murder which will clearly not need the likes of Sherlock Holmes to solve. I think crime of passion, a phrase we often hear, needs to be updated. And I say this because passion to me is indicative of an artist, a writer, an actor, maybe even a gardener, a rock collector, whatever your passion in life might be. Crime of passion lessens the responsibility factor of the murder, as if almost excusing the murderer's motives in some way. I realize investigators describing this don't mean it that way, but I am one who believes words matter today more than ever. And we should, I think, get rid of that phrase within the crime world. Zandra's mother had given them Pugh's name right away, and they take one look at his record and know instinctively that he is likely their guy, especially after hearing the stories about him and seeing the letters where Pugh made several threats. Zandra had even filed a complaint to the Department of Corrections about Pugh, which of course did nothing because the system has a tendency to shit all over victims and give the perpetrator the benefit of doubt. Hell, they even let Pugh out of prison early, this after knowing he was abusing Zandra from behind bars. Our system is not designed to protect victims more than it is designed to appease and moderate their complaints, patronize them before turning around and doing nothing. I challenge any official to show me otherwise. Victims of domestic violence and those experiencing stalking and repeated threats by abusers get nothing but, as I said, a piece of paper from a court, which is completely worthless. It's there only to make things official. The system, I would go so far as to say, empowers abusers to keep abusing because there is never any accountability. That is, until they act out and do something homicidal or put their victim in the hospital. If the courts won't do anything, and law enforcement won't do anything because they claim their hands are tied by the courts, as a victim, where in the hell do you go? What do you do? If Zandra would have killed Pugh in self-defense, I have no doubt she would have faced a nasty, expensive trial for second-degree murder and been made out to be the villain. And keep in mind, this guy had groomed Zandra from the time she was 16 years old and had years and years of controlling and gaslighting her under his belt. By June 1, 2006, they speak with Pugh's cousin, who claims to have information about the murder. The cousin says he began working with Pugh in 2005, and almost immediately, Pugh began talking to him about wanting to kill Zandra. Not off-the-wall comments or "I'll kill her" type of tough guy talk under his breath. Pugh made specific comments about using various things he could get from his job to help him commit the murder and get away with it. They worked with chemicals, so they had protective gear all around. Boot covers, gloves, masks, tape, smocks. Your basic Dexter stuff here. "I'll wear 2 of everything," Pugh told his cousin, bragging. "No one will catch me." He has a temper and flies off the handle, the cousin says. He told me he wanted to F that B up and get even with her. There it is. It's all right there. You'd think. The cousin seems upset and angry with himself for not stepping in and stopping the murder. He would sit outside her house every week and watch to see where she was going and with whom, the cousin says. Hindsight is 20/20, they say. But unless you do something about what you know in the moment, it might as well be blind. Let's take our final break and come back with more Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps. The sad fact about domestic violence murders is that when we look back at them, it seems we can see the murder coming like an off-the-rails locomotive years and years before the crime ever takes place. We often see this in the immediate aftermath of these cases. A woman is murdered and everyone around them points to one person as if they knew someday it would come to this. Matthew Pugh would not leave Xandra alone. She asked for help from the system we have in place, and that system did nothing to protect her. We have to come up with a better way to deal with repeated domestic abusers and stalkers and those who violate restraining orders. A one-strike law or something similar. You get one mulligan. You violate an order a second time, you go directly to jail without passing go. No questions asked. And we need to stop allowing judges to give these guys a second, third, fourth, even fifth chance. They don't change. At the crime scene, they find tape and a knife blade. The tape is connected back to Pugh's place of work. And they also find a roll of that same tape inside Pugh's house. So you'd think this is a slam dunk. Right? This case, boom, bang, bong, solved immediately. Not a chance. They find blood in Xandra's bathroom, which is indicative of Xandra's killer trying to clean up and also destroy evidence afterwards. The DNA they find on the tape and inside the bathroom matches Matthew Pugh's DNA at the highest level of testing available. It's him. Bet your ass it is Matthew Pugh who murdered Xandra. Then they check Pugh's cell phone, and after getting those records, they are able to construct a map and timeline. Pugh going from his house, which is over an hour away, to Xandra's in Milford, staying in the area for several hours before returning home on the day of her murder. Still, it takes 6 years from the day Xandra was murdered to arrest Matthew Pugh. So long, in fact, Xandra's case wound up as the two of clubs on a deck of unsolved homicide cards used to promote rewards for information in cold cases and distributed throughout the corrections system. Almost 5 years ago now, my very first episode of Crossing the Line was about those decks of cards, long before that other true crime podcast turned it into a show of their own. It's not until March 2015 when Pugh is finally convicted for Xandra's murder after a jury trial. He was sentenced to 60 years in prison. During his sentencing, Pugh sat smugly with a grimacing, cocky look on his face, reading a copy of Norman Vincent Peale's book, The Power of Positive Thinking. Kind of a last-minute showing of his narcissism. This might have made him feel like a tough guy. A year later, Pugh is found guilty in a second case, 4 counts of robbery and also shooting a Yale University graduate student he accosted and robbed on her first day at the New Haven campus. Deliberations in that case took all of 90 minutes. He was given another 15 years for that case. So 75 years he's got. Let's see if he does 30 of those. Pugh's cousin, who was the link to the case, claimed a $50,000 reward for the information he was able to give in the case. It turned out that Pugh murdered Xandra with one of her own trophies, which he used to beat her to death and then stab her with the sharp side of it after breaking it in two. To look at this guy reading that book during his sentencing, with that churlish, I'm a tough guy look on his face, is actually ironic, laughable. It displays a boy in a man's body. He thinks he's winning by displaying some sort of power move, reading, not paying attention, ignoring justice. But it just goes to show everyone there how ignorant and, in the end, cold and callous this guy actually is. If you or someone you know is affected by any of the issues raised in this story, or you are experiencing domestic violence on any level whatsoever, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233, or text START to 88788. They have resources. They can guide you. I'll also put that information in the show notes. That's it for this week. I just want to remind everyone that coming up end of October, beginning of November 2025, Paper Ghosts Season 5 returns. The Texas teen murders. My biggest case yet, I'll say. Be safe. Be aware. Sources for this episode include the arrest warrant application for Matthew Pugh, Connecticut Superior Court, Milford Police Department. Connecticut.gov, Division of Criminal Justice page. Crossing the Line is executive produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, and Matthew Valentinas, Mom's Basement Management. Written by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Music by Epidemic Sound. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.